On this episode, we'll discuss how church leaders can prioritize mental health in their ministry. Well, hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast, the show that is dedicated to inspiring leaders and empowering healthy churches. I'm your host, Kendall Connor, and we have an incredible conversation for you today, one that I think hits at the heart of really what it means to lead well and stay healthy while doing it. We're going to be diving into a topic that I believe every pastor, every ministry leader, church team, they all need to consider, and that is mental health in ministry, a very important topic. Before we dive in, I do want to take a quick moment and just say this. I am not a mental health professional, and neither is this podcast or Ministry Brands. The content that we're going to be sharing today is really for informational and educational purposes only, and it's not intended to diagnose or to treat or replace the professional care and counseling that you can get. We believe that mental health is a vital part of a healthy church and of healthy leaders, and our goal with conversations like this is simply to just connect you with trusted professionals who can help, like our guest today. If you or someone that you know is struggling with mental health, we really encourage you to seek help from a qualified professional or a local mental health resource that's in your area. I'm so glad that we have folks to talk to like this, and we're going to get to talk with someone who I know is super knowledgeable about this topic today. Joining us, which is a returning guest, is Laura Howe, and I want to tell you all about her. If you've been with us for a while, you might remember on episode 67 where Laura, she shared some powerful insights all about building an effective care ministry. If you missed that one, I highly recommend going back and giving it a listen because you get to hear from also some other folks from our team. But this is the first time that I get the opportunity to talk with Laura today, so I'm excited about that. Laura is the founder of Hope Made Strong, an organization that is dedicated to equipping churches and leaders to care for their communities. And this is the key, without burning out, which I just think is so important. She's a mental health clinician, a community development strategist, and she's the host of the Care Ministry podcast. Through her work, she helps pastors and ministry teams build those healthy care structures and lead with emotional and spiritual resilience. It's amazing. She's super passionate about helping churches become those safe spaces where people can heal and thrive. And it all starts at the top with those leaders. You can tell that today is going to be a good conversation. One last thing before we jump in, I always like to encourage all of you listeners out there to hit that follow button wherever you're enjoying our show. That's the best way to make sure that you don't miss any of the conversations or resources that we put out, because we really want to help you to lead well. All right, without further ado, let's jump in and let's welcome back to the show, Laura Howe. How are you today, Laura?
Hey there. Glad to be here. I'm doing good. This is a good day.
It's a good day. It's a good day for a podcast, I think.
It's a good day for a podcast, definitely.
Well, we read the public bio, but something that we
Yes.
always like to ask on our show is maybe what's something that doesn't make the public
Oh,
bio
man.
that all your family and friends would know about you?
My goodness. Well, that public bio, it's hard to sit through that as a listener. I'm not going to lie. I was like, whoo, the imposter syndrome's building. No. All of that passion and energy directed towards supporting leaders and churches really comes from my own story of brokenness. I have a lived experience of compassion fatigue and burnout that required me to take sick leave off of work. I'm a clinical mental health social worker. And so while I am not a theologian or a pastor, I am definitely a caregiver who has been through it, and know and deeply the intensity that burnout can bring to leaders and
Yes.
caregivers and their families and their health and their personal lives and families, their careers. All of
Yes.
it seems to be impacted and touched by compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and burnout. So
Mm.
I would say that part is not in the public bio, but it definitely is the foundation of where everything came from.
I love that, and kind of just hearing your heart. And it's always, it's always inspiring to me to hear kind of the why behind, folks get into their area of expertise. And, that's just, I can tell that you bring a lot of heart to that. So thank you for all
Uh,
that you're doing to help these ministry leaders.
It's exciting. It's exciting. We're excited to talk about it with all of you and hopefully inspire and bring hope and encouragement to people who are, neck deep in this caregiving and ministry role.
Well, I love that. Well, let's just jump right in. I mean, I know that you work with so many pastors, so many ministry leaders. Why do you think that caring for these leaders, why do you think caring for their own mental health is one of, the
Mm.
most important things that they can do really for their church?
Mm. Well, I go back to that story, that lived experience story of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. Don't talk about the workplace hazards of caring for people and
Mm,
people work. There's workplace hazards in construction or
right.
maybe in engineering or something like that. But the workplace hazard for caregiving work and people work is compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma and burnout and moral distress. All of these areas are very weighty and can impact someone's well-being. And so if we want to retire well, many
Mhm.
people in our profession retire on sick leave, and that is not what we
Wow.
want. If we
Right.
want to retire well and we want to have flourishing lives and thriving families and relationships and our own health, then we need to consider our own mental health. It is it is linked, we'll say. Our mental
Yeah.
health impacts our emotional health, which impacts our physical health, which impacts our relational health. All of these elements and areas of life are interdependent and codependent on each other. And so
Yes.
by caring for our own mental health, we have longevity in ministry. We are able to fulfill, God's greatest commandment to love others as we love ourselves. And so we want to do that well. We want to care and lead well. And so mental health is a big component of that.
I feel like right out of the gate, there's so much that you just gave us there, right? Because, I've been around the church for a long time. I've seen, what it can be like to lead and how, really as a church leader,
Yeah.
you mentioned the phrase compassion fatigue. Is that did I say it right? Is that the way
Yes.
that you describe it?
Yep.
I have lived that, right? Because you
Yep.
care so much for these
Hmm.
people that you're leading in your ministry. And, if you're in a place of leadership, you're going to have people that come to you. They're going to be sharing their hearts. They're going to be sharing their
Yes.
struggles, and it can be so easy to carry that weight.
Yeah.
And I know that that's a real thing that leaders are dealing with.
For sure. I equate it to like going to a campfire. Like when you want to help someone, you don't want to get too enmeshed. You don't want to get into the business, right? You don't want to be impacted by someone else's messy life. But
Yes.
just like you don't want to smell like smoke when you go to a campfire. But no matter how hard you try
Wow.
and pick your
Wow.
seat, you're gonna walk away being impacted. And the funny thing is we don't think about it. When the
Right.
symptoms of compassion fatigue don't correlate exactly when we're weary and we're edgy and we're cynical and we are so exhausted that not no amount of sleep can restore us
Mm,
when we feel like we want to withdraw from those closest to us. We don't think those are as because of our caring work. We think that, oh, I'm a bad pastor, I'm a neglectful spouse, or I'm an
right.
angry parent. And we point inwards when we can say, those symptoms are directly related to your
Wow.
exceptional caring. You are
Wow.
a wonderful caregiver. You are sacrificial in your
Yeah.
life, and the impact of those is a little sneaky, we'll say. And we often don't attribute those symptoms to the caregiving work we do. We attribute those to a lack of faith or a weakness in
Right.
ourselves, and that is
Right.
not the case.
Wow. Well, I know that in you talk on the subject of care ministry so often, and it
Mhm.
is it is caring for people in ministry is incredibly rewarding, right?
Yes.
It's what we want to give people the hope of Jesus. It can be super rewarding, but it also can be isolating. And
Mhm.
I'm just kind of curious, what are some of those um, maybe we'll call them early warning signs that as a leader who might be listening today might be kind of running on empty, or maybe they're headed towards burnout. We talked about that a little bit
Yeah.
earlier.
Man, the early warning sign that I experienced, and which I think is familiar to many, is an over connection to others. So you would think if we're fatigued because of our caregiving, we
Wow.
would pull back, but that's not the case. That's not what research is telling us. What
Wow.
it is that we get overly involved in someone's life. We start skipping our lunches. We work late. We go into work sick. We don't take vacations, or we say things like, God has put me in this person's life. I am the only person that can help them. And we
Mm.
become enmeshed in their story. And so,
Wow.
when we find that we are working more than the person we're helping, that
Mm.
is a red flag or a yellow flag to say, "Ooh, let's take a step back and say, how are we refueling and refilling our own tanks rather than constantly giving out?" Because that is the antidote to compassion fatigue and burnout, is having times of refreshing and refueling and tending to the needs that we have. And that can be really tricky when we're surrounded by people who, by comparison, has greater needs. But
Sure.
God's love is not limited. It's not a
Mm.
sum zero game here. So
Yeah.
we can receive the love and compassion and grace of God just like everyone else.
Wow. I mean, so much good stuff that you shared there. I'm just kind of curious before we talk more into some of these things. Can you, for someone who's listening to this today that may
Yeah.
not know all the different ways and areas of care that come in ministry, what does that what
Mm.
are some simple ways that you see that in churches? I
Yeah.
imagine there's such a thing as like going to your pastor for counseling or for spiritual
Mhm.
advice and that kind of thing. But what are some of the other areas that might look like?
Yeah, at Hope Made Strong, we look at a holistic or a broad umbrella of care. So, care for many people, maybe the food train or the meal train, or going to pastoral care or visitation. But care really is much broader than that.
Mm.
I look at care as however you are empowering or infusing belonging, purpose, and hope into a congregation. And at Hope Made Strong, we have different cohorts and mentorship opportunities where we talk about 5 different pillars. And these are community engagement. Community outreach is how we care for our people and
Sure.
whether that's compassion ministries. We have families and students, premarital counseling and supporting students often can be considered as
Sure.
care. Mental health and well-being. This is our, talking about burnout, talking about all of, many, many different areas of mental and emotional well-being.
Yes.
That's a huge component that's kind of woven throughout everything, if I'm being honest.
Sure.
Healing and recovery ministry, whether it's grief or trauma or addictions. Those sound like really hard things, but really just being present for those moments is really key. And then spiritual formation is a component. I really equate care ministry as a train going in the same, a parallel train to discipleship. We're talking about walking with people, being present with people through the different ebbs and flows of life and whatever suffering or celebrations those come with. And so, how we look at care ministry from Hope Made Strong really is quite broad and needs to be determined by the church, because every church has a different culture, a
Sure.
different vision, a different people group that they're reaching. And so, we don't want to define care ministry to be this cookie cutter, copy paste kind of program. It's
Sure.
much more the compassion and support given to the church, given to the congregation by the church.
I love that, and I appreciate you giving those examples because I think any church leader who's listening to this today, or anyone who's been a part of a church, has probably seen some of these things in action before.
Oh, for
But
sure.
but it's a good reminder that any area as a leader that you're providing care, that you're helping people, that you're raising up leaders, that you're coming to them to give them that spiritual guidance.
Yeah.
It is an area of care, right? And
Yeah.
I've heard you share before that boundaries can be an important part of all of this. Really, if you're trying to make sure that as a pastor or as a church staff member, that for you to stay emotionally and spiritually strong, you've got to have some boundaries. You've got to have some
Yes.
guardrails in place. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Talk about prevention of burnout and compassion fatigue. Boundaries is your go-to resource. Without boundaries is self-control, right? We want to
Yes.
be able to not engage ourselves too much in other people's lives, so to develop a codependent relationship with them.
Mm.
But it's boundaries really is important so that we are healthy. These are as simple as how are you booking your appointments? How are you booking your time? And I hear a lot of pastors and ministry leaders say, okay, easier said than done. Boundaries is kind of like work-life balance. Is like, does it
Yes.
actually exist?
Right.
Right? It's hmm. How do you actually put that into practical application?
Right.
And that's what we teach churches is how do we build teams so that everything isn't dependent on an individual. We want to be allow people to have time unplugged and away to rest and refuel. We want to be able to have people engaging in their own well-being and their own spiritual walk and just simply enjoying life as God intended and created life to be enjoyed. And so we want people to set healthy boundaries around when you're meeting people, how you're answering calls, who has your number. And these are just around building systems and strategies and teams, which is what we're all about at Hope
Yes.
Me Strong.
I love that, and, all of these initial questions have been kind of built around making sure that leaders can, prioritize their mental health, and what I'm
Hmm.
hearing is that you can't be accessible all the time to
Oh,
everyone always, right? And you do as a leader, you have to make it a priority even as you're caring for others, even as you're ministering to others, you have to make sure that you're staying in a healthy place so that you
absolutely.
can continue to do this with longevity.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question about it. I don't think anyone in leadership would argue with that statement. The
Sure.
hard part is just how do we do that?
Yes.
How do we do that when the expectation has been built up that I am available on call all the time when there's an emergency. An emergency is defined by the individual doing the calling. It's a cat in a
Right.
tree or like who
Right.
knows, right? Like
Right.
I'm being facetious here, but you know what I mean. And so it's just how do we talk a lot about systems and strategy in Hope Made Strong. So, how are we managing people's expectations of our availability and how are we creating a system or a strategy to manage those expectations? So how are prayer requests? How do people book appointments? How do people engage? How are crisis responses being managed or fulfilled or connected to? So
Yeah.
uh, there's definitely ways of doing it, but you're right. It needs to be very intentional.
I love that, and, I think for every leader that's listening to this today, I think it's just a good reminder that, care and the care that you're giving to your congregation, to your community is so, so vital, it's so important, but it so is prioritizing your own mental health. I
Mm.
love that.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
wanna shift a
Definitely.
little bit and think about the teams that are leading our churches because it's not always the lead pastor, it's not always those high-level leaders, it's also a church staff or a volunteer team. I know that a healthy church starts with a healthy team, a healthy individuals that are kind of leading the way. What are some ways that these leaders can, or maybe that our pastors can cultivate a culture where the staff
Mm.
and the volunteers they feel safe to talk about mental health and maybe even the stress that they feel?
Yeah. That is a tricky shifting culture. I was listening to Pete Scazzaro in doing a webinar, and I overheard like he shared with the group that it took 7 years to shift the culture in his church to that emotionally healthy framework. And I
Wow.
was like, 7 years, that's fast. That's fast for a culture shift. That's amazing. And
Sure.
we
Yeah.
often want culture to shift in a season. In
Right.
a semester. We want to
Yes.
start something new in the fall or
Yes.
over the summer break. We want to
Right.
shift
Right.
some things. Man, oh man. So if we want to shift our culture, it really takes time. It takes intentionally. It takes a plan, and it takes leadership. And leadership is a lot of modeling. And so, talking about suffering in a way that's not shameful.
Mm,
And that is a way that is not associated with weakness or poor work ethic or habits. And when we think about mental health and support, think of it like we would an athlete. You know, athletes, more successful an athlete is, the more coaches they have, the more supports they have
mm.
in their life, right? Like
Wow.
I am not an athlete, but when I there's a defense coach and a kicking coach and a throwing coach.
Right.
I'm clearly not an athlete, nor do I know sports, but they probably have physio, and then they have a massage therapist, and then they have an
Right.
acupuncturist. Like there's so many people. The more successful someone becomes, the more people they have on our team. And so when we think about shifting the culture, think of it in that way. How
Mm.
can we bring on more people to support our congregation, support our staff, support our leaders?
Wow.
Because the more people on our team, the likelihood is the more successful that they'll become. So I think it's shifting the mindset and leading by example. Hey, I have a coach, I have a therapist, I have a nutrition person, I have a financial aid person, I
Yeah.
have a mentor, I have a friend, I have a recovery support. Like all of these things, we all are human. We all need those things, right? We all
Yes.
struggle and suffer, but who do you have on your team like you have for those athletes?
You know, so much good stuff there. First, what I'm hearing is don't do ministry alone, right?
Oh gosh,
It
no.
sounds like the more the higher the higher level of leadership you have, the more support you're going to need, and the more important and more crucial the role. You got to have that support. That you got to have folks
Mm,
that are supporting you, who are helping you along, and you don't want to
yeah,
do this alone. And then I
yeah.
also love, we talked about shifting that culture, just making it so that leaders in your church, they feel like it's okay. There's not, you mentioned the
Mm,
word shame, which I feel like, mental health and shame, I feel like we've come a long way in this in the past few years, but there still can be, that impression that, it's shameful to talk about mental health, that,
mm.
that if you're having a struggle, that it's something that you should be embarrassed about. But really what I'm hearing from you is you got to create a culture where people are willing to talk about what, the things that they're facing, and build a culture where they feel like they can bring this stuff up.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we don't want people to talk out of their wounds. Don't want people blubbering and processing their trauma in
Mm,
front of a group, right? There's wisdom and discernment and maturity,
so good.
in this. We want people
Great
to share
points.
from their scars.
Mm,
But there's definitely, their lessons learned, the things that they've overcome and worked through already. But I think the modeling of transparency and vulnerability
wow.
is powerful.
For leaders who are managing teams, I'm just wondering, what are some ways that they can kind of spot when a staff member or a volunteer just might be struggling? And
Mm.
what's the best way to respond to them with compassion and kind of provide that wisdom?
Well, there's many different ways. The first is just noticing a change. So, my husband is extremely extroverted, and so a change for him is that he wants to withdraw. For me, I'm more introverted, so a change for me is wanting to go out. So, for me, for someone to think, oh, she's really, pulling in and isolating herself. Now, that's just a Friday night for me. But for my husband, who's like, who can we invite over? Where can we go? So it's really just first knowing your team and knowing your staff and noticing
Mm,
a change and just saying,
mm,
hey, what's going on? And giving time and space to say, hey, what's going on? And then interrupting them with the phone call or looking at your phone or having your door open and more people coming in just feels like it's just rote, it's trite, like it's you're not
mm,
really asking, but giving space to really kind of get into the weeds. And obviously, trust needs to be built in order to have that vulnerability. And so, connecting with people when you notice a change is a real thing. But when I was struggling, I my supervisor was amazing. Her name was Pat, and she's a lovely, lovely woman. And she just checked in more regularly with me. And hey, how's this going? How's that going? What's going on at home? What's going on here? How is that impacting you? Have you noticed things? people notice change and they just don't put those dots together because they're in the middle, they're in the vortex of the storm, right? They don't
Right.
see the
Right.
connection points.
Right.
So just listening and not trying to solve people's problems, but drawing connection points. Hey, you mentioned this last week. How is that going? Or this happened. I'm wondering if that's connected to that, and it might not be, but it might be. And so I think people need less answers and more reflection and a
Mm.
safe space to talk it through. When things really got tough for me and I started noticing that my fatigue was impacting my relationships and impacting my work, there was definitely permission saying, hey, we have sick time for a reason. Like, it is
Right.
okay for you to
Right.
go. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? Just sit at home and do nothing? And Pat, in all her wisdom, was like, yes, Laura, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. Like it is, giving people permission to take the time to tend to their needs it was helpful for me when I got to the point where I was noticing things impacting and seeping into multiple areas of life. I needed someone to say, it's okay. You're not weak. You're not a
Mm.
failure. You're not a bad pastor. You're not a bad small group leader. It's okay. We're here with you and we're going to walk through this with you, but it's okay to tend to your needs.
Such good wisdom with this, and it just reminds me that I know that as church leaders, sometimes we get so caught up in, Sunday comes every 7 days, right? We've always got that event that's coming up,
Oh,
you've
yeah.
got the big
Pressure's
seasons,
on.
Christmas, the pressure is
Yes.
on, Easter's coming up, whatever it may be, in your context, and we just have to remember that, yes, those services are important, yes, all those things, but that
Yep.
staff and those people that you're shepherding, though that's truly what matters, and it doesn't matter
Yeah.
if you have a super successful worship set or, the perfect sermon, all these different things, if
Mm.
you aren't taking that time to care for the people that God's
Yes.
entrusted to you, and so
Yes.
it's a good reminder to slow down, to look around, and to, to just assess the folks that are in your care. So
Yeah.
I love that. What a
Yeah.
great reminder today.
Yeah. Yeah. It says in Matthew 28, come to me all who are weary and heavy burdened, right? So we first have to acknowledge that we're weary and heavy burdened and then
Mm,
go to Christ for rest and find rest in him, right? So
yeah.
being heavy and weary and heavy burden is not a sin. It means we need rest. And so
Yes.
we have to acknowledge that is, kind of those first points.
So good. I think about this can all rely just on the lead pastor. And I'm
Mm.
just kind of curious, I know you've seen so many different systems and things like that. What's a way that, I'll say second chair and beyond, other leaders that you have in a church that aren't that lead pastor, how can they work to kind of carry the load together rather than placing
Yeah.
it all up at the top?
Well, that's what like building systems and strategies and teams. My gosh, that is absolutely key for something to be sustainable
Yeah.
and scalable. We often think of systems and strategies as cold paperwork or forms
Yeah.
or workflows. Like these are all cold functions, administration. We're the people. We don't want administration. But that is what makes things sustainable and scalable. So I think first, like I said, we don't have cookie cutter care ministries. We don't have specific roles for specific people because some churches, their lead pastors are more corporate minded and they're not as
Mm,
shepherding. And then the number two or three or fourth, or, other people on the team are more shepherding. So really just assess. It's a lot of assessment. So like look at your
sure.
team, look at your people, look at your congregation and say, okay, where are the strengths, where are the needs, and where does the church vision overlap? If you think of those three things as like a Venn diagram circle, like what are the strengths? Who are the strengths? What are the needs? And what is the church vision? Because the church can't serve everyone, right? We can't have a
Right.
homeless ministry and a food ministry, an addictions ministry, and a small, new moms ministry. It is very rare for a church to be able to be all things to all people. I don't think any church can be all things to all people well.
Sure. Sure.
And so what is the vision of the church? And that's the sweet spot. That's where you start. So take off the expectation and the mindset that you're going to be able to serve all people. You can't. So what
Wow.
are the areas you can serve? What is the sweet spot where the strengths the needs and the vision of the church overlap. Start there. Get really clear on who's going to help, what they're going to help with, and where you're going with it. The rest, build partners, build community collaborations, refer to other churches. Hey, you don't need to have a recovery group when the church down the street does, unless it's God's calling you to, right? The Holy Spirit's
Wow.
always leading
Yeah.
first.
Work
So
together.
find out,
Yeah.
yeah, work together. And so if you're a number 2, 3, or 4, if you're other people, other leaders on the team, use their strengths to meet the needs in your congregation that aligns
Wow.
with the vision of the house. That's the sweet spot to start with.
Such incredible advice, and I love the illustration that you painted there, but I think that's a great way to go about looking at it. I do wanna shift a little bit to
Yeah.
thinking about the congregation. So
Mhm.
the people are that God has entrusted us with. Let's talk about the people that are in the pews and maybe
Mhm.
even in the community around us. What do you believe? What role, I should say, do you believe the local church plays in supporting the mental health of its community?
Well, my goodness, Kendall, how much time do we have left? Not enough, that's for sure. Because that's a whole situation. So, um, the local church. Okay, so let me start off with this, some context of why I'm so passionate about this, and I'm gonna resist the urge to get on my soapbox about this, is when I was working in community mental health, my job was creating peer support programs to be concurrent with clinical programs, meaning
Sure.
how do we raise up, train, and support those with lived experience, those with
Mm,
diagnoses and a history of addictions and chronic illness? How do we take the wisdom and skills that they have developed, and how do we partner that with a clinical setting so that they're paired together? So, a peer supporter is paired with a clinician, because research is telling us that when those two pieces are paired together, you're going to get the best and greatest outcomes and longevity of recovery regarding mental health, chronic illness, or addictions. And so this research is happening. And so in the healthcare field, I'm from Canada, so our healthcare system is very different. So in our healthcare system, we're all about preventing illness. And so in the healthcare system, we want to prevent people from going into crisis. And so by pairing peer support and clinical work together, you're going to get the best outcomes. So I'm doing this job in the community. I'm manufacturing peer support. I'm finding
wow.
those who have lived experience and training them so that they can support people alongside clinicians. Meanwhile, I'm attending church and I'm looking around, and there's every single person in the pews and in the chairs on Sunday
Right.
morning.
Right.
This person has recovered from cancer. This person has gone through a messy divorce, and this person has parented a child who's suffered. This person
Wow.
has a diagnosis of bipolar. This person has gone through grief. Our congregation, our pews are full of peer supporters.
Mm,
We have an exceptional, like no other organization has, a community
wow.
of mentors and peer supporters where we can come alongside the great work that clinicians are doing. And so if the church is able to step in and provide the peer support, what an incredible, impactful, and powerful way to reach our community and to foster hope and foster health and nurture the well-being of our neighborhoods and of our families and our congregations. And so when you think about how can the church support mental health, I think that was your question, right?
Yes.
What is the role? How is the church able to support
That's right.
mental health? I think the church just needs to be the church. The church
Mm,
needs to empower and to train and to raise up those peer support leaders, the people who have gone through the muck and mire and have a testimony to share, train them so that they're able to come alongside their neighbors and come alongside their friends and family and their other community members, and they're in the pews or in the
yeah.
streets,
Yeah.
and be the peer supporters, because peer support is an extremely powerful tool and resource for mental health and well-being. And so that's why I'm getting
Yeah.
on that soapbox. I'm taking my
Right.
foot off now and just saying, like, the church there's no other organization, there's no um, you know, there's no Awanas club or like all of these
Right.
clubs that are in small
Sure.
cars in my community parade. I don't know. Do you guys have those? Like the
Yeah.
what did
Oh,
they?
yeah, I'm
Anyway,
trying to think
yeah,
of all the different ones, but
it's
yes,
they
I'm
look like
tracking with you.
circus. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all of these clubs. There's no book club. There's
Right, there
no,
you go.
mom's group. There's no men's group out there that goes from birth to grave with an individual like
Wow.
the church. There's no
Yeah.
clinician, there's no doctor. And so the church really has a special opportunity to come alongside people in a way that's not clinical, but is hope-filled
Mm.
in testimony and in lived experience. And I think the church is ripe for opportunity to be a momentum builder and part of this movement around mental health and mental well-being in our communities.
I think it speaks to the power of the church. I think it speaks to the
Yes.
power of that community, and I love
Yeah.
hearing your passion about it. I hear that, and and I think to say it in simplest terms, you're saying that both the professional side and also the community side, they're both important. When they work
Absolutely.
together, it really makes the biggest difference.
Absolutely.
My question though is what's the best way to get started with this? How can a church or a leader that's listening to this today, what's a great first step that we can
Mm.
go towards with the picture that you just painted for us?
Yeah. So, look around your congregation and find out who are the champions of their lived experience. Who
Mm,
are the people that have gone through and lived to tell the tale?
mm.
Mentor them. Build leadership skills in them and mentor them and equip them to serve and care for others.
Wow.
They're there. They're usually the last people. They're usually in the building. They're praying for people. They know who's lost their job. They know who's going through
Yeah.
treatment. They know.
Yeah.
And so really find out who those people are. They are your secret agents. They are the people with the secret sauce. I don't know how to say it, but those are the
Sure.
individuals that are going to shift your culture from programs of care to cultures of care
Mhm.
because they have the lived experience and the wisdom to share.
That's so powerful, and I'm thinking in my own church, I'm thinking of those. It makes me think of the people who I just think would be so perfect for that, right?
Right?
Um, yeah, the more you think about it, I feel like the more,
It's
faces and
right in front
names
of
come.
us.
Yeah, it's right in front of us. I love
Yeah.
that, and, you talk about simple steps. I mean, what are some practical ways that just
Mm,
churches can start talking more openly about mental health and,
yeah.
get that in front of our people that it isn't something shameful, that this is something that's a priority for all of us?
Yeah, yeah. So I would recommend having a mental health Sunday. So, mental health, the conversation and topic of mental health is often relegated to a back room on a Wednesday night for a small group
Mm,
or on the prayer line or in
yeah.
hushed conversations in the corner after service. Let's bring it to the stage. Let's pull it out. Every single person is impacted by mental health. We all have mental health, just we have thriving or languishing mental health in those moments. And so let's bring mental health up front and talk about it because it does impact everyone. And so
Yes.
how do you have a mental health Sunday without it being like workshoppy and lectury? Like Sunday morning, you want to, provide hope, you want to bring scripture, you want to talk about the biblical principles and all of these things you
Yes.
want people to take away. So we have created a resource called Mental Health Sunday, mentalhealthsunday.com. And it is 3 themes. If you don't know where to start, we've created 3 themes for you to get started on. This is a free resource, by the way. So you can just download it. It's all your sermon
Love
notes, all
that.
your social media, all the graphics, every a devotional to give away
Sure,
as
sure.
after, like all of these things. And the 3 themes are you are more than your past, you're more than your diagnosis, you are more than. So it's talking about identity. You are not alone. The
Wow.
stigma of mental health, addressing the stigma of mental health. We all struggle with mental health, and
Yes.
the church is with you, and God is for
Sure.
you. And then the other one is keys to resilience. And
Mm,
these are what are the 7 keys. So if you want, you can split that up into multiple sermons. But what are the 7 keys that will really build your
wow.
resilience to prevent you from getting stuck when suffering? And they're biblical things like
Yeah.
meditating on the word, right? And finding
Right.
rest and Sabbath and
Right.
forgiveness, right? Like these are all spiritual
Mm,
practices that we talk about. So you're not shifting off your normal kind of rhythms of a Sunday sermon, but you're addressing mental health publicly from the front by the pastor. And I think that will just be it will create so much opportunity and so many
Yes.
conversations saying, wow, I feel hopeful. I don't feel alone. I feel like I belong here. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Such great stuff that you shared. I mean, I will definitely link that up. All of those
Okay.
resources that you mentioned, we'll put that in the show notes so make it easy for all our listeners to find those. And I love the ideas that you've shared because I just think talking about this just makes such a
Right?
big difference.
Yes.
And I would encourage all of our listeners to just make this a priority in your ministry to just be open about it, to be upfront about it, to be
Hmm.
transparent, and to bring it up into your messages and your small groups and all these different areas. I think there's so much potential. Well, Laura, you've answered this question because you've been on our podcast before, so I'm kind of curious to hear your fresh take on this. One of the
Okay.
big themes for our podcast is healthy churches and leaders.
Okay.
And so, in your opinion, what is one essential component of a healthy church?
One essential component of a healthy church. Ooh.
Kind of a loaded question, isn't it?
It is. I'm trying to pick what part we talked about. I'm gonna have to say teams, that everything isn't dependent on one person.
Mm,
It's an echo of what we already talked about, but it is so key. If one person holds all of the authority, holds all of the answers, and holds all of the resources, then that is that yellow flag, yellow card.
yes.
But if we delegate and we empower
Mm,
and we equip, then that is everyone benefits from that. People
yeah.
with lived experience are now able to have purpose
Mm,
and give back to the community. People with leadership potential are growing in their skills. This is, to me, that is discipleship. To
yes.
be honest, is empowering and
Yes.
equipping people in their faith and in their leadership in their community.
So good. Great answer. Well, to wrap things up today, I'd love to take you through a final five, kind of a
Okay,
rapid fire round. Are you
here
game
we
for
go.
that?
I'm game. Here we go.
All right.
I remember from last time being
Yeah,
all,
yeah.
what do I say?
What is one book on this subject or something similar that
Oh.
you would recommend for church leaders?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have not said this to anyone, but we are starting a book club for care leaders. And the
Oh,
first,
wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
starting in January of 2026. And so I'm going to be, our very first book is the newest book by Bill and Chrissy Gaultier, called Deeply Loved. And we're starting
Mm,
off with that one because it's talking about empathy for leaders and how can we care for ourselves. We often look outward so much, but we often
yes.
resist or even reject care for ourselves and empathy, self-empathy, and self-care. And so that is what we're starting with. So I
Incredible.
think that's a
Yeah,
good
I'll
one.
link that up in the show notes as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll
yeah,
have
yeah.
to check that one out. Okay, what is the last thing that you listen to on Spotify or Apple Music? What are you listening to these days?
Oh gosh. Well, my kids are musical theater. Well, I have one musical theater kid. So we probably were listening to like Hamilton
Mhm.
or Newsies
Yeah.
or whatever
Right.
whatever yeah, my year end summary and, Spotify Wrapped is usually full of musical theater.
It's gonna be like In the Room Where It Happened, or I'm trying to
Oh
think of
my
some of the
gosh.
songs.
Oh my gosh. It is intense. Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. All right, what is your favorite piece of technology or software
Mm.
right now?
Well, we are coming up to the Church Mental Health Summit, and the summit is all hosted on the software Kajabi. And so that is my favorite one right now because I'm in it like 8 hours a day right now.
That's awesome, and I definitely I wanna hear more about this event. We'll come right
Okay.
back to that
Okay,
in
okay,
just
okay.
a minute, so that's awesome, but tell us the software that you're using one more time?
Kajabi, it's a learning management software. So if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have online courses or events and all of that kind of stuff, it's a great tool for that.
Any recommendations for how a church leader might be able to could use that, maybe for as a tool for even for, like, some online discipleship, right?
Oh my gosh. Well, it is one of those all-in-one, it can do everything everything kind of
Yeah.
software tools. It's expensive, but it's so helpful. But, if you want to run your small groups on it, you want to host different, you know, trainings, your volunteer trainings. It's like if you want to do online courses. So if you trained your volunteers or you had a resource directory of, this, that, or the other, this is a really great tool for that.
Awesome. All right. Next one is, what is a quote or maybe some advice that has stuck with you over the
Oh,
years?
well, I did say earlier that I'm a bit more of an introvert. And every once in a while, I'm just like, man, I wish I had more friends. But I'm like, but most, the 80% of the time, I'm like, I don't want any more friends. But every once in a while, and the quote always comes back to me is like, he who wants friends must first be friendly. And I
Mm,
think leaders often isolate themselves. My hand is in the air for this. And then we feel lonely or we feel overwhelmed or we feel like, oh, I'm in this alone. No one understands. And so if we want to have connection and community in our lives, then we need to offer that out. We need to
mm.
sow some that if we want to reap some of
Good wisdom. I love
that.
that.
I'm eating my own, cake and that right
As
now too.
as
So,
a fellow introvert, I completely understand, and
okay,
I think I've even quoted that to my kids, and so
yeah.
that's a great quote. That's a great quote. All right, what is one thing that you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders today?
Mm. That you're doing a great job. That I know the vast majority of ministry leaders are just so passionate about their neighborhoods and their community. And I just am so grateful for your heart and your passion and keep it up. There's a team of people, there's people you don't even know praying for
Mm,
you and cheering you on and from a distance. I can't be in every community, but your neighborhoods. And
right.
I'm just so grateful for the heart and passion of shepherds. Like it is a
Mhm.
precious, precious gift. And please care for yourself so that heart that you have doesn't grow resentful because of the needs are draining. The people will never be satisfied. Go back to the Hamilton quote. There we go. People will suck you dry with their needs, not intending to harm you, but be to meet their own needs. And so I just pray for the leaders out there that they have mentors in their life that are telling them, fill your tank, get
Yes.
rest. You can do this, and thank you for your work.
Such a good
Mm.
word for today. Laura, this has been awesome. I know that our
Mhm.
listeners are going to want to hear more from you. Tell us all about where they can hear more from you, and also tell us about your event that you have coming up.
I'm so excited. Now, this is super last minute. So if you're listening to this live, fantastic. Come join us at the Church Mental Health Summit. And if you're listening to this backdated after the 10th of October, don't worry, I have you covered. We got some opportunities for you to connect with Hope Made Strong. So this every October 10th is World Mental Health Day. And this is our 6th annual Church Mental Health Summit. It's an online event featuring over 50 speakers from all around the world, all focused on equipping and supporting church ministry leaders to care for their community well and support the mental health of their congregation and community. It is free. It is online, churchmentalhealthsummit.com. And it's kind of like Netflix, but for care ministry, if that makes any sense, where
Sure.
you can
Yeah.
just log on and watch. There's 5 live talks that gives opportunity to connect with speakers live. But for those who are checking this out afterwards, we do have a resource for you that is much more like a subscription model, like Netflix or Right Now Media or something like that. So this is our 6th year. So we have well over 300 talks, all available
Wow.
around equipping the local church around care ministry, mental health, recovery, spiritual formation, students, all of these things. And it's all organized into those categories so that it's easily searchable. And so if you are looking for team training resources and volunteer support, and maybe for your staff retreats, you want to listen to these 20-minute talks and then have a roundtable conversation of how do we bring this into our culture and how do we offer this in our community, then those are there for you. So that is the Church Mental Health Summit. And then I'm quickly going to mention Hope Made Strong. When we're not organizing a global event, we are supporting and coming alongside churches in developing care ministry strategies. So doing those assessment pieces, offering tools. We have an online community, a podcast you mentioned at the top, and then a cohort, which is a 5-month-long mastermind that helps you develop
Amazing.
and build a care ministry. So lots happening around care over at hopemadestrong.org.
That's incredible. We'll link all of those items up in our show notes to make it easy for all you listeners out
Oh,
there to
thank
check out
you.
those things. But Laura, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being on here with us today and sharing all this important conversation, this important topic with us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been incredible. I feel like I've got so many one-liners and quotes that I've got to go back and jot down. So much good content. So thank you. For all of our listeners out there, be sure to check out those show notes again. We're going to put all those links there so that you can check out Hope Made Strong, that you can check out the Care Ministry podcast, and learn all about the mental health summit that's going to be coming up that Laura mentioned. We'll make sure that we get you all linked up. If this episode has encouraged you today, if this has been helpful to you, would you consider sharing it with a friend? We want to get this into as many ears of church leaders as possible. And every share makes a big, big difference. And also, if you're enjoying this, leave a review for us. We love reading those and just hearing how these are helping you and encouraging you and equipping you as you're serving in your community. That's one of the best ways to keep us encouraged as we're encouraging you, because we want to equip church leaders just like you all around the world. Don't forget to hit that follow button wherever you're enjoying our show. Until next time, keep leading well and keep caring for your own soul as you're caring for others.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple-to-use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.